So good morning, everyone. I'm Heather Mackay-Brown. I'm the co-president of the League of Women Voters of Bellingham-Whatcom County, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you today. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging, with humility, that the land where we are today is the territory of the people of the Salish Sea, and their presence is imbued in the waterways, shorelines, valleys, and mountains of the traditional homeland of the Coast Salish people since time immemorial. These voter forums are presented by the League of Women Voters of Bellingham and Whatcom County and the City of Bellingham. Whatcom County has provided the facilities, and the forum is recorded by BTV Bellingham. Forums will be repeated on BTV Bellingham, on the City of Bellingham's YouTube channel, and on our website. And the Linden Tribune and the Northern Light are our media partners. So we thank all of these partners for their generous support, and if you have the opportunity, please thank them as well. The League of Women Voters was founded in 1920. We're a non-partisan organization with 800 affiliates across the country. We encourage informed and active participation in government. We work to increase understanding of major public policy issues and to influence public policy through education and advocacy. The League never endorses candidates or political parties. Membership is open to men and women of all ages, and we invite you all to join us. There are brochures and plenty of League members just outside the door, and so if you're interested at all in joining, we'd invite you to speak to any of us who can tell you about the benefits and pleasures of joining, or you can join up on our website. Today is the second of 3 forums that are produced this month by the League of Women Voters of Bellingham-Whatcom County. And today features candidates for the 40th Legislative District Senator, Whatcom County Council at-large position, Whatcom County Council District 4, Whatcom County Council District 5, and the Whatcom County Executive. On Wednesday, July the 24th, we'll co-host with the Linden Tribune a forum for Linden City Council candidates at the Linden City Council Annex, and that is at 6:30 p.m. in Linden. The details are available on our website, and they've been published in the Linden Tribune and the Northern Light. These forums are the property of the League of Women Voters of Bellingham-Whatcom County and the City of Bellingham. They may not be used in any manner without specific written permission from both parties. And I ask you please to respect our requirement that there's no other video recording from the audience during this time. And can I please remind you to all turn your cell phones off? Off or on airplane mode would be great. So, Helen, do we have our third candidate? So we'll proceed with the 2 candidates who are here. I will be moderating the first debate, or forum, so you get to hear from me quite a bit. I will introduce the candidates and explain the rules of procedure. So the first debate this morning will be the candidates for the 40th Legislative District State Senator. There are 4 candidates on the ballot for this race. They are candidates Carrie Blackwood, Elizabeth Lovelet, and Daniel Miller, and Greta Aitken. Greta Aitken informed us that she is unable to attend, and present today we have Carrie Blackwood and, can I call you Liz? Lovelet, candidate Lovelet. The Washington State Senate is made up of 49 members, 1 from each legislative district in the Senate. In the state. 1/2 of the membership of the Senate is elected at the general election held in November of each even-numbered year. During legislative sessions, the legislature is called upon to enact or reject legislation affecting public policy in the state, to provide for the levy and collection of taxes and other revenue to support state government and assist local government, and to appropriate funds for these purposes. The Senate also has the exclusive power to confirm certain gubernatorial appointments. Although laws are enacted only when the legislature is convened in formal session, policy issues and the general operation of state and local government are under continuous review by legislators serving on permanent and interim study committees. Washington State Senators serve 4-year terms, and their annual salary is $52,766. So the rules for the forum: candidates will have up to 2 minutes each for an opening statement, and they will then have 1 minute to respond to each question and will make a 1-minute closing statement. Each candidate has a challenge card. So if you could just hold up your challenge cards and display them. Thanks. Candidates may use this card to challenge or rebut their opponent's response. The challenging candidate then has 45 seconds to state the challenge, and his or her opponent will have 45 seconds to respond to the challenge. Each candidate may use their challenge card just one time. Use it well. Our timers sitting up front are Judy Hopkinson, Carol Como, and Michelle Kopcha, and they will be tracking the time. The timers will flash a yellow sign when 15 seconds remain, okay? And a red sign to signal that time is up. If a candidate continues to talk, the bell will be rung to signal stop talking. I'd like to say I have the power to cut your mic after that too, but I don't. We ask that candidates be respectful of the time allotted due to the limited amount of time that we have and our desire to include as many questions as possible. An important goal of the League is civil discussion. To that end, we also ask that those in the audience be respectful and that you refrain from comments as well as holding your applause until the conclusion of the debate. Some questions were prepared by our League Question Committee before today. We also encourage members of the audience to provide written questions, which should be addressed to all candidates. Ushers are available to pick up your questions and bring them to the screening table in front. So if the ushers could just stand up and wave their hands in the back. So if you would like to send a question up to the screening table, you can raise your hand from the audience and one of the ushers will bring you a card and will take it for you. Each candidate will be asked to respond to the same question during the debate portion. The order of the candidates with respect to questions and answers has been determined in advance by the League organizers to ensure a random and fair sequence. So, with the rules covered, let's get started. So timers, are you ready? And question screeners? Okay. So for the opening statements, Candidate Lovelet, would you please give your 2-minute opening statement?
Yes, testing the mic. So I'm going to tell you a story about a little girl who grew up in the wilds of Fidalgo Island, and when she was 7 years old, first heard about the hole in the ozone layer. And she heard about racism, and she heard about sexism, and she became a lifelong champion for those issues in her community. And at 16, she went to college, and she graduated with honors from both her community college and her high school, and then dedicated her life to 2 years of national service. So she went into AmeriCorps, and she moved to Washington, D.C., and then she spent a year in an international social justice program. After that, she came home and she started a little business. She bought one, a record store. And during that time, she had 2 babies and made it through the recession and successfully sold it. And she decided that she was ready to get more involved because that time in her business gave her a great foundation in her community to hear more about what was happening around her and to advocate for things that were important. And so she became a PTA president, and she became the vice president of her farmers market board, and from there decided to run for office. And so at 33, she ran for office and took out a 2-term incumbent with 68% of the vote. And then she got elected again, and then she got elected again. And during that time, she fought against the hazards of oil trains and what climate change was doing to our infrastructure. She tried to protect our immigrant communities by working with law enforcement to make sure that they were not marginalized. She worked on issues around homelessness and housing affordability. And she worked really, really hard enough that this last February, she was appointed to the legislature. And she got there 6 days before policy cut off and got 6 bills of her own to the finish line and 29 pieces of legislation, 485 total, and voted on many bills that affect lives in the 40th. And that's me. I'm your senator, Liz Lovelet.
Thank you. Candidate Blackwood?
Yes, my name is this on? Is it good? My name is Carrie Blackwood. I am an attorney here in Bellingham, Washington. I work at Barron Smith Doggart, and I practice labor and employment law. In 1995, I graduated from Fairhaven College's Law, Diversity, and Justice program, which was a program that was intended to help diversify the Washington State Bar Association, because unfortunately, the people who sit on the bench don't always reflect the diversity of the communities, and we wanted to create more opportunities for access. In 1998, I graduated from law school, where I studied alternative dispute resolution, labor and employment law, and also international criminal tribunals. I went on then to represent organized labor for nearly 2 decades, fighting for really what is workplace justice, but also economic equality. But I realized that enough wasn't being done. Enough wasn't being done. And so I stepped out of that role, and I thought about how we could be more effective in the political arena. And when this role came up, I was interested in it because I felt that people were really ready for change. The 2 issues that I'm out here working on, number 1 is the climate crisis. We are in a situation where our response to the climate crisis is not proportional to the crisis, and we need to make sure that we're changing that. We have a real opportunity within our community because we have 4 of the 5 fossil fuel refineries right here in our northwest corner, which makes us not only responsible, but also vulnerable. And we are going to be the community that figures out what is the plan to make the fossil fuel transition, and make a plan we must, for both our economic and for our physical health. I'm also here on the growing economic inequality. For a long time, we've had prosperity in our community, but that prosperity has not been shared. And it's time that we change that, and that's why I'm running, because I think you're ready for that as well.
Thank you. And we've been joined by our 3rd candidate, candidate Daniel Miller. So if you catch your breath, could I ask you to give your 2-minute opening statement, please?
Okay. So I want to thank the League for having this forum here. I'm Daniel Miller. I'm just a little bit late. So I'm running for state senator in the special election for 1 year. If I want to be there longer, I'll have to run again in 2020. I attended the Evergreen State College in Olympia. I also attended the University of Washington, where I studied legal studies. We'll bring some exciting and important issues to Olympia if I am elected. From the law that never was to important issues on agriculture, from free speech, individual liberties, to a great economic outlook. I look forward to your questions, and during your questions, you can learn a little bit more about me. As far as agriculture, this place is very rich in agriculture, and I think those products should be promoted down there in Olympia. I can be counted on to work against high taxes. I can be counted on to try to look at the budget and find money that's there for programs. I was the 1996 winner of the Republican primary for state legislature, a long time ago, years ago. I had a very popular antique store in Olympia, Washington, in Friday Harbor, called the New England Collectibles. So I know how to manage a business in good times and bad. Maybe some of you visited my store while we were up there, while you visited Friday Harbor. We had great collectibles. So please consider voting for Daniel Miller for State Senator, 40th District. Thank you.
Thank you. And so we'll start with the first question, and the way the order has come up, candidate Miller, you will respond first. So my first question is, what are the most important challenges facing our state, and how do you propose to address them? You have 1 minute.
Well, important issues would be the budget, looking for money to fund education, looking for money to fund different important projects. If I go to Olympia, I want to Okay, so I want to vote on important things, but I also want to have hearings. And I didn't mention that during my tenure in Olympia, I want to have some hearings on health. I want to have some hearings on the correlation between Alzheimer's, dementia, and certain medications, and also some hearings on missing persons in national parks. So I want to rely on experts. I also want to invite the citizens down there too to the hearings. And thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Blackwood.
One of the number one issues that's facing our community right now, as I articulated earlier, is the climate crises. We just unfortunately saw the carbon tax not pass here in Washington State, and I think that that was really challenging for our community because a lot of work was done and we could see the crisis, but unfortunately our full community wasn't on board for that. I do think that there is opportunity to be as aggressive and progressive on getting in front of the climate crisis, and we have to continue that work, and I'm committed to doing that. Also, we have an incredibly regressive tax system. I have been very vocal on this campaign that I do support an income tax. We just had a a Court of Appeals decision come out last week that's really going to open the door for us, and I'm supportive of making sure we get in front of our regressive tax system. At the same time, we have a broken civil and criminal justice system, and we need to make sure that each person in our community has equal access to justice, or really justice does not exist in our community.
Thank you. Candidate Loveland.
Thank you. Yes, I agree that climate crisis is the number one thing that's facing us. All of the rest of what we need to solve is secondary to that. I'm a trusted member of the Just Transition and the Blue Green Alliance, and my endorsements from the conservation voters, the Sierra Club, and the labor community reflect that commitment. I also am a tireless advocate for housing. I wrote Anacortes' first strategic plan around affordable housing and will continue to champion those issues in the legislature. Additionally, hand in hand with housing and homelessness goes reform in our DSHS system. So I'm currently working on a bill to help do some reform around income eligibility and universal application. Additionally, we have a crisis happening right now with our school districts. 8 of the, I think, 30 districts that were left out of the levy fix are in the 40th, and it's especially hard in the San Juan Islands and in Anacortes, where they're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars in budget deficit. So working to solve that issue and make sure that our school districts remain whole and are able to keep the special programs.
Thank you. For the second question, Candidate Blackwood will give us the first response. Living wage job creation is often touted as an important solution to poverty. Do you believe this is true? Please explain why or why not.
Well, I spent about 2 decades activating on this issue because I do believe that if we do not have economic equality, we have no possibility to heal our natural environments or build the healthy communities that we all want to live on. I have negotiated countless collective bargaining agreements and had numerous times employers tell me, both in the public-private sector, that we didn't have the right amount of money to take care of the people that were working for our community. So I do believe that investing in workers is an investment in our community. I want to make sure that in the public sector that we're not contracting out work, that we're keeping work union work, and that we are supporting the $15 minimum wage statewide, and that we're also making sure that we're dealing with discrimination in the workplace and creating opportunities for there to be wage equity, which we don't have now, and that we're supporting collective bargaining.
Thank you. Yes, I can do that. Living wage job creation is often touted as an important solution to poverty. Do you believe this is true? Please explain why or why not. Candidate Loveland, could you respond?
Absolutely. Having meaningful work and having the ability to pay your bills is the most foundational thing we have for community health. Around housing, if you can't make enough money to pay your rent, to pay your mortgage, you're always going to be at a disadvantage. And unfortunately, too many people are living paycheck to paycheck. And having had that very recent lived experience, I was applying for food stamps 2 weeks before I joined the legislature. So this is not something that I remember from my childhood. This is something that is real and lived experience. So that's why I'm so passionate about making sure that as we diversify our manufacturing, that we're thinking about the jobs of the future, that we need to support a higher minimum wage to make sure that people are not being left behind. And we need to make sure that we are, the paddle went up, need to make sure that as we create jobs, we're being very mindful of the impact that they have. The more that we can create symbiosis in our waste streams, in our energy manufacture, the better.
Thank you. Candidate Miller?
The question was about living wage, right? Okay. So a living wage is important. And if I was running for president, which I'm not, I would have been a strong opponent of NAFTA and outsourcing. We need to keep jobs local. It's good if people get, a good minimum wage. We can discuss that later. But keeping jobs local is important. Keeping ferries built in the region is important. Also, I was a little bit late, so I want to address, about an income tax. I oppose an income tax. An income tax is actually illegal according to the Washington State Constitution. Now, there are schemes and strategies to try to get around that, but currently, an income tax is actually illegal. Although, we don't have enough time to really talk about the issues. But also, I question whether a federal income tax is legal as well, because there was a book written called The Law That Never Was, thank you.
Thank you. So for our third question, Candidate Lovelet will respond first. What legislative measures would you support or propose, and why, to make children in our schools safer from gun violence?
Well, I am honored to carry the sole endorsement from the Alliance for Gun Responsibility and have been an active member of my local Moms Demand Action chapter for many years. My daughter was a kindergartner when Sandy Hook happened, and I remember going to her school that day and pulling her out and just crying in my house. I was proud to support legislation this year that removed guns from domestic violence scenes, that banned ghost printing of guns, 3D printing of guns, and we had a bump stock buyback program. I think all of these common sense measures to reduce the availability of these kinds of firearms is absolutely necessary. I support making sure that they have locks, that they're safely secured, that we're making sure that I don't see a need for civilians to have military-grade weapons.
Candidate Miller?
Okay. Gun safety is very important. It is true. There are some people that should not have access to guns. There are some crazy people out there. But we also need to support the Constitution and the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution. So I'm a strong supporter of the First Amendment, Second Amendment. I don't currently hunt, but I have been involved with hunting elk and deer in the past. And so we need to make sure that firearms are protected as well. There seems to be an attack on the Second Amendment and also the First Amendment in the country. So I would appreciate your follow-up questions on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Blackwood?
When Seaholm High School first opened and I asked my daughter what she thought about the new facility, she indicated that the main room in the high school is so big it makes them a target for a shooter, and that made her uncomfortable, and that was her first reaction to walking into the new high school. There are some weapons in our community that have only been created to kill human beings. That is their only purpose, is to kill human beings. And I want to make sure that those weapons are not in the hands of anybody in our community. I want to make sure that every firearm is registered, that there are age limits on firearms, that we're licensing every single owner, that we're training every owner, that we're mandating storage, and that we're talking about what should be a cultural shift shift about whether or not having weapons in our community makes sense for us. I'm ready to have that conversation. I grew up with guns. I'm the daughter of a soldier, but I know that it's no longer time for our citizens to be soldiers in our own communities or in our classrooms.
Thank you. Just to remind the audience, if you would like to pose a question, the ushers have blank note cards and pencils for you to write questions on and send them up to the screeners. So our fourth question will be answered first by candidate Miller. Do you support increased state funding and other support for early childhood education? If so, what are your plans for such funding and support?
Okay. I want to address that, but I just want to address also about gun registration and gun licensing. That kind of horrifies me a little bit. First of all, when I was a hunter, well, I still am, but I haven't hunted for several years, I took gun safety. Gun safety is a very good thing, and I appreciated my gun safety class. But the notion of gun registration and gun licensing, firearm owner licensing, that will lead to gun confiscation. It kind of reminds me of Nazi Germany a little bit. So seriously, that's very kind of scary to me. Early childhood development. My sister has a degree in early childhood development. I support early childhood development. Once I get to Olympia, I can look at the budget and try to find more money for childhood development. There's a lot of money out there, more than people realize. Thank you.
Candidate Blackwood.
The most important thing that we can do is invest in a child when they're young, and having a fresh start in life is important for lifelong development. We know that when we invest in early childhood education that we are investing in our community. I do support fully funded preschool programs so that everyone has access to preschool. I also want to make sure that our inequitable funding system for education is corrected. Right now, the way financing is structured within Washington State for schools means that communities that are already affluent have access to better school environments and better learning environments, and that's because of our inequitable funding system. And I think that local school officials are ready to take that on and have a plan to do so. We also have to recognize, though, that the number one indicator of whether or not a child will be successful in school is their socioeconomic status. And we know that the number one determinant on your socioeconomic status, unfortunately, is your demographic.
Thank you. Candidate Loveland.
Yes, I am a huge advocate for early learning because we know that it is so foundational to children having a good start in life. As a doula, I've helped women have their babies in both a home birth and a hospital setting, and so I've seen firsthand how crucial it is to have that support in those very early months for them to succeed at parenting all throughout those children's lives. I was proud to vote for the expansion of our ECAP program. That's our free preschool. And making sure that we added a higher threshold for income qualifications so that more people could participate in it. Additionally, I think we need to have better funded childcare. We have a real problem in our communities with people who are having to travel great distances, especially with infant care, to find places for them to be. Additionally, I think it's incredibly important that we make our preschool and early learning culturally appropriate, that we address language barriers, that we address those socioeconomic barriers, and make sure that all children have the opportunity to have the best start possible.
Thank you. Candidate Blackwood, you'll respond first to this next question. The state of Washington is currently experiencing an outbreak of measles. What is your position regarding the requirement for immunization for school-age children?
So I want to start by saying that I do believe in self-autonomy, that I should have the right to make decisions over my own body, and unfortunately women have been denied that for a long time. At the same time, I recognize that we live in community, and when we had a recent outbreak, it meant that it was incredibly important that we got immunized, that we were getting our immunizations, and that when our kids were walking into their schools, they were walking into an environment that would be healthy for them. And when the move came to remove the religious exemption this year from the ability to opt out of the immunization, I was supportive of making sure that we removed that so that we would have healthy communities communities in our school. I personally have autoimmune issues. I both have Crohn's disease and something called autoimmune neutropenia, and my daughter is not able to get immunizations. And so having a situation where we've got kids that are able to infect other children in our community is not okay with me, and voting against that was a vote against public health, and I support immunization in our public schools.
Thank you. Candidate Loveland.
Vaccinations are fundamental to public health. My children are vaccinated, but being in the legislature this year when that bill came through, we had a tremendous amount of people coming out in opposition of it. And one of the things that I heard from people was that they felt very strongly about separating out measles from the mumps and rubella piece, because there's more complications around the mumps and rubella side than there is on the measles, and measles has been the issue that we've had with public health. Additionally, I think we need to work on clarifying medical exemptions, because there are people who legitimately do need to opt out that don't really have a path forward. For example, a friend of mine who had a near-death experience as a baby because of a vaccine, her doctor recommended that she not immunize her children, but she had no way forward to get a medical exemption because of the liability issues for those physicians. So absolutely foundational to public health. This is something that we need to make sure our schools are safe in and to protect those that are immune compromised. So I support that.
Thank you. Candidate Miller, would you like me to repeat the question? Okay. The state of Washington is currently experiencing an outbreak of measles. What is your position regarding the requirement for immunization for school-age children?
Okay. First of all, let me say, I had the measles when I was a kid, and it's not fun. I was out of school for about 2 weeks, and yeah, I hated the measles. But so it's very tricky. This is very tricky because I was out campaigning the other day, handing out flyers in front of the post office, and this individual came up and took my flyer, and she acted like she might want to support me, but then she asked about the vaccinations, and I didn't give a strong enough negative response to vaccinations. So she said, no, I'm not going to vote for you. It's very complex. It's very controversial. If I get elected, I would like to, I'm not running for president, but I would like to kind of govern like JFK. Bobby Kennedy, John F. Kennedy's brother's son, is opposed to vaccinations. So some vaccinations are necessary, but it's very tricky. They put thimerosal and some dangerous chemicals in some vaccinations. So we can't really talk about it in 2 minutes. That's not enough time. Some vaccinations are bad and some are good. And I'm sorry, I was late, and if I don't have enough time, I don't have enough time. So if you kick me off the stage, you kick me off the stage. I didn't appreciate when I came in, the Women's League of Voters were like coming down on me like a can of bees and stuff. So
Please
go ahead.
could you yield your time to the other candidates, please? Right. Question 6, and candidate Loveland will answer this one first. What is your plan for helping the homeless in our communities?
I had the opportunity to go to the Association of Washington Cities conference last year and see a really incredible presentation about a program that they have out of Walla Walla. They're called Conestega huts, looking like the back of a covered wagon. But they're a very simple plan that gives temporary shelter, safe sleep space to homeless folks, and it does it at a very reasonable price. And then because of their temporary nature, it makes it so that they're able to circumvent a lot of different permitting hurdles. I was proud to support a bill this last session that had to do with SEPA, the Environmental Policy Act exemptions for when you're in a state of emergency for homelessness. But I think the number one thing we need to do is prevent homelessness from happening in the first place. I was proud to work on eviction reform this last year, making sure that people don't experience that. Additionally, I support adding cost of living increases for retirees because there's a lot of pressure on them and there's a rising amount of homeless seniors. So making sure that we're insulating our most vulnerable community members from experiencing it in the first place.
Thank you. Candidate Miller?
Okay, this is about homelessness, right? Yes. Homelessness is very important, and I'm concerned about homelessness. And I've seen the uptick of homelessness in Seattle, Whatcom County. It's really exploded. Down in Los Angeles, it's an epidemic. So I want to have a council. I want to have a forum in Olympia, a hearing on homelessness, and I invite stakeholders, citizens. When I was in Los Angeles, I'm a lifelong resident of Washington State, but when I was in Los Angeles for a while, living there, I met some homeless people. One girl, she used to work for Star Magazine, and then her dad was one of the lawyers who sued the police at Rampart. Remember the police abuse situation down there at Rampart so many years ago? And she fell homeless, and it wasn't really her fault. So I'm concerned about homeless people. I know homeless people, and some homeless people are good people. They're not all drug addicts, and some are drug addicts. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question, Candidate Miller, you will answer first. Declining salmon runs and increasing difficulties in shellfish farming are realities in the Salish Sea. Oh, I'm so sorry. Excuse me. Candidate Blackwood, would you answer the previous question?
Well, sometimes the simplest answer is the best. If you want to deal with homelessness, you need to house the homeless. It's as easy as that, it's as simple as that. Washington State made a larger commitment this year to provide funding to local communities through the Home Trust, and we have the opportunity to access that money. So one of my jobs, if you elect me as senator, is to make sure that we're bringing as much of those resources into housing funding back into our community as we can. Bellingham has been incredibly active and effective in making sure that we're providing subsidized housing, but subsidized housing really is a Band-Aid. Subsidized housing is the effect of the problem, not the cause of the problem. The cause of the problem is our growing economic inequality, our broken healthcare systems, our broken criminal justice systems, and our long history of marginalizing and oppressing certain demographic groups within our community. I will fight on all of these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. So Candidate Miller will answer the next question first. Declining salmon runs and increasing difficulties in shellfish farming are realities in the Salish Sea. What, if anything, should the legislature do to further protect the Salish Sea from continuing acidification and rising temperatures?
Okay, so acidification of the oceans is a real problem. Protecting the Puget Sound is important, and now, of course, they call it the Salish Sea. Once I get to Olympia, I would like to have some hearings on this issue. It's really complex, and I can't really sit up here in 2 minutes and tell you an answer, but I want to have some hearings. The acidification of the sea, is it from the geoengineering programs they're using to stop global warming? Is it just pollution? I would like to have a host of professionals and citizens come down to Olympia for a hearing. Hearings are very important, and we can get to the bottom of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Blackwood?
So we know that our waterways are unhealthy, and this is for all sorts of reasons, including our overconsumption of water, not having, keeping pollutants out of our waterways, from overfishing, and from not supporting our shore health. We also have blocked the ability for salmon to swim freely through our waterways, including not funding the repair of our culvert systems or making access possible. We need to make sure that we're taking down the Snake River dams. We also need to keep carbon out of our atmosphere. All of these things are affecting the health within our Salish Sea. I remember very deeply, and one of the things that caused me to run was one of our resident orcas carrying her newly born child and keeping it above water so we could all see what we have done. We could all see what we have done. And so it's time for us to undo these things and to make sure that we are creating both human and environmental environments that are healthy.
Thank you. Candidate Loveland?
Yes, well, we sponsored many bills this last session having to do with orca recovery, and we definitely have a long ways to go on the culvert removal piece. We have about $3 billion worth of culvert removal that needs to be taken care of in the coming decade or two. There's many contributors to the ocean acidification issue, everything from pharmacology, our prescription medications going through the effluent that ends up being dumped into our waterways, not properly managing all of our stormwater on our roadways. We get exhaust out of tankers and ferries, which particulates come down onto the water. So all of these things are things that we can manage with the right investments in technology and innovation. There's a company that just opened up in Anacortes that is producing marine-grade batteries for larger ships. So that's one of those ways that we can take care of the exhaust situation. Additionally, we have to make sure we have robust investments in watershed management and hatchery improvements.
Thank you. Candidate Blackwood, you'll respond to the next question first. What has been your experience promoting diversity and equity in your home or workplace and in our community, and how would you continue that work in the Senate?
Can you repeat that question for me?
What is your experience promoting diversity and equity in your home or workplace and our community, and how would you continue that work in the Senate?
I think I started on my first diversity committee in 1992, and I didn't stop. My undergraduate degree is in law and diversity. I co-founded the Multicultural Law Student Association at my law school. I also have sat on leadership positions in many organizations, including the Hispanic Law Student Association at my law school, on various union committees, and was most recently appointed by the Washington State Supreme Court to the Diversity Committee for the Washington State Bar Association, where we actively worked on how we could diversify the bar and push back on the rhetoric that was happening in our community and the lack of diversity within our court systems. This has been a lifetime of work for me. I also have my own lived experience of discrimination and oppression, and lived experience for my family as well. So I will continue this commitment in the Senate to both bring my own lived experiences, but also a lifetime of inner work and external work, and I can tell you that equity exists in my own home.
Thank you. Candidate Loveland?
So after I graduated from high school, after being a fierce advocate for the LGBTQ community, I went and moved to Washington, D.C., and did a year of service there, covering territory from Texas to West Virginia, where I got to see deep racial divides in the communities there. And then I was in an international company that promoted diversity and equity and social justice. So had spent many years living in those environments, learning from the people around me. I remember going into a store one time with my friend who's African American, and her being followed in that store. And it was the first time I really had to check my white privilege and realize that that is absolutely a thing that people have without knowing it. And so it's important that we acknowledge that and that we start to dismantle what makes that happen. I believe in cultural competence in our policing, making sure that we're removing those biases and that we're properly training our police forces, and that's something that I worked on in Anacortes as well.
Thank you. Candidate Miller?
So diversity. There's different types of diversity. First, I'm going to talk about diversity about Republicans and Democrats. I'm a Republican, but when I was in Olympia, I studied with Senator Karen Frazier, who is the senator from Olympia on Washington state governance. And she's a Democrat. We got along really well. With my land, I used to own a collectible store, but now I do landscaping, and a lot of my customers are Democrats. So I get along with Democrats, Republicans, Greens, and I have a lot of Democrats, Republicans, and Greens voting for me. When I was down there in Los Angeles, it's very diverse, and I got along well with people down there in Los Angeles. There's many different cultures, many different races, so diversity is important. And when I was down there, I worked with people of various cultures and races, and got along with people of various cultures and races. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll move now to the last question, and Candidate Loveland, you will be the person to respond first. In 2017, the Association of Washington Business published a report stating that unreliable infrastructure, such as poor roads and airports, results in higher costs for business to manufacture and distribute goods. Do you agree? And if yes, what should the legislature do to rectify this?
I think this is one of the areas that is the strongest piece that I bring to the legislature. My background in local government in both budgeting, public works, and planning makes me very well suited for dealing with these same issues at the state. So one of the things I've been a huge advocate for and participated in very strongly was comprehensive planning, both around the effects of climate change on our infrastructure, road management, all of those things. And having experienced it firsthand from a budget perspective, it is incredibly challenging. And unfortunately, the state no longer has an account called the Public Works Trust Fund, which I sponsored a bill last session to restore in order to make sure that smaller jurisdictions have access to the money they need to protect our infrastructure. And absolutely, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. When we front load our investments in infrastructure, they are more durable and it costs less to maintain over time. So I'll continue to try to restore that fund, and additionally to make sure that our local government has the assets and resources they need to be able to maintain those for the cities.
Thank you. Candidate Miller.
About infrastructure. I like that idea that Senator Lovelett just brought up about a trust fund for infrastructure. That actually makes sense. So many times trust fund, like the transportation, okay, so that makes sense. A lot of times, as long as we don't rate it, a lot of times trust funds are rated for other things. So I support infrastructure. There's a lot of good infrastructure projects happening in the region, and I'll continue to support that. As far as climate change and things like that, a person you might want to talk to is Dane Wigington out of Shasta, California. He explains the truth about what's really going on with geoengineering and climate change, and that's a big issue. And I'll work on that too once I'm down there in Olympia. But I guess you said this is our last question. I have to reiterate, freedom and liberty are really important too. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Blackwood.
So I represented public sector workers for over a decade, and one of the hardest challenges we had was to push back on the privatization of public sector work. Unfortunately, the rhetoric that was out in the community was that the private sector could do it cheaper and better, and what that really meant is that we were funding public dollars into private profit at the cost of public sector work. So I want to see as much as possible that we're bringing public sector dollars back into funneling public sector jobs where we can have good oversight and we can remove the profit model and move more towards securing communities. One of the most important books that I've seen out there on this issue is a book called The Fight for 15, and it talks about how the privatization of SeaTac Airport led to the loss of good paying jobs, healthcare for workers, and much more. So we actually absolutely need to refund the public sector and bring the work back where we can keep it in place and heal our infrastructures.
Thank you. So that was our last question, and we'll give each of the candidates an opportunity for a 1-minute closing statement, beginning with candidate Blackwood.
I've talked about that since 1972, which is the year I was born. We've seen incredible economic inequality grow despite tremendous prosperity. And that also in 1972, my mother swam across the Rio Grande River so that I could be born in the United States and have a chance at a better life. And we just saw a couple of months ago a father and his daughter laying on the side of that same bank. So I'm sort of done swimming that river in every way that we're doing it. I want to be done with that. I'm done swimming that river. At that same time, we have been told that we do not have the will or the knowledge or the politics or the money to heal our natural environments. And I can tell you every single time I've sat down at a collective bargaining table, they have told me that they don't have the money, that they're going to lay off our folks, that they can't afford healthcare, they can't afford to pay us. And I want to let you know that every single time we push back and we won, we can do the same thing on the environment here in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Lovelett.
I love what I do. I have spent my life as an advocate, a champion, a leader in my community, and I am the only candidate in this race with elected experience. I am doing well in the legislature, and I have formed a lot of great relationships and partnerships throughout my time. I encourage you guys to look at my list of endorsements. I've been endorsed from everybody from the teachers to the firefighters, the Sierra Club, Attorney General Bob Ferguson. I mean, the list goes on, and all of those endorsements signify a relationship, an interview, a questionnaire that I had to go through in order to earn them, and I have earned them all. And I am in there already. I really love what I do. I'm the youngest mom in the Senate, and we have some pretty dramatic underrepresentation of working class people, and I would love to earn your vote.
Thank you. Candidate Miller?
I'm Daniel Miller. Why should you vote for me? I'm really concerned about struggling families and struggling single people and elderly here in the region. There's a lot of people that are having a tough time making it, and I don't think we should increase the tax burden on them. I also am concerned about freedom and liberty, and there's certain corporations and government entities that are attacking free speech, religious liberty, and today. I'm also interested in agriculture. I want to promote agricultural products, from berries to daffodil bulbs to wines to cheeses, of course, dairy. We need somebody that'll bring some important issues up and look for, discuss shenanigans in Olympia, as well as look for government waste. We need to have a counterbalance to the situation caused by Jay Inslee and crew down there. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much to our candidates, and I hope the audience will join me in expressing our appreciation for their time today.